So who is the best AoE unit in general in Triangle strategy? So we've done best melee, best mage, best utility, best archer, and a few others, but we have not done who the best AoE unit is. So AoE is an abbreviation for area of effect. What it means is hitting multiple things. So the area, of an effect. So okay, so what are our criteria for best AoE unit? So I'm just going to go through, there's 10 points. I'm just going to go through each one as we're going. I've grabbed units that if they are not specifically AoE units, they at least have access to AoE in a way. So those are 2 units, Anna and Piccoletta. I'll go over that in a second. But alright, so how much damage can they deal with their best AoE? So everyone's best AoE, in this case, so Corinton's would be Glacial Moon, Frederica's would be Sunfall, Travis's would be Heavy Smash, Maxwell's would be High Jump, Roland's would be Flash of Steel, Giovanna's would be Gaia's Roar. So if we're just looking at like raw damage and consistency, I would say it depends. So Frederica's Sunfall it's basically the highest hitting AoE in the game. However, it does require turn accelerator, but if we're just going for just raw damage, then this goes to Frederica. If we're going for consistency of their damage, I would say probably Corinton, because he has a huge AoE like Frederica, but he can just use it right away and there's no charge, which makes it a little bit more flexible and easier to use. It's also generally cheaper. You can Sunfall at any amount of TP, but when you want to get big value from it, you're going to be using it at 4 or 5 TP. So you're generally going to want to use it for 5. So it's kind of an issue of getting her turn accelerated, getting her TP all the way up. She can't generate TP, like extra TP, unless she kills things, whereas Corinton can just get free TP every turn from being on ice. So that's a little bit more useful in my opinion. But for just raw damage, it definitely goes to Frederica. Okay, so how often can they use their best AoE? So this one, I would say, goes to Corinton. So for some of these other units, Narv's best AoE isn't going to deal as much damage as Corinton's. In general, it's not going to hit as many targets. It's harder to line up. For Archibald, same thing. It hits in a line. It can be hard to line up. For Avlora, actually, there's an argument. Actually, yeah, let's do this. Let's put Avlora in here. Her Bloody Cross easily can deal as much damage as Glacial Moon, so I'm going to throw her up here. High Jump, so how often? So she can get it off similarly. She can just run around whacking things with Risky Maneuver and then just Bloody Cross. If they're both batteried, it's kind of similar. Corinton can get it off slightly more. So it's kind of I would still say Corinton gets, it's still easier for him to get it off just because he generates 2 TP a turn. And then for Maxwell, High Jump costing 5, you get 1 back from hitting more than 2 things, from 2 birds, 1 stone. So as long as he's at 4 TP, he can use this on his next turn. So what he needs is 3 TP handed to him so that he can high jump spam. That requires Julio giving him 1 and then Medina giving him 2, or Julio giving him 3, or any combination that allows him to get 3 TP. So he can't spam this as often as other units can spam theirs. And to be fair, it's kind of the case. I mean, Avlora needs what? She needs 3 as well. If she's at 1 TP, if she's at 0 TP, she generates 1, and she needs 3 TP. So I would say Corinton probably can spam Glacial Moon the most consistently. He needs 2 TP. Yeah, so I'll just give this to Corinton. All right, what is the range of their best AoE? So the range, Frederica and Corinton have 0 to 6, and then it can hit up to 8 tiles away. And then with Maxwell, with High Jump, it's a 1 to 5 range, but he can also move before it. So it's an effective range of 1 to 10. And then it also hits 2 further. So for range, I would say it's a tie between these. Now, you have to also consider that Corinton can move and use Glacial Moon, increasing its effective range. But I would say it's fair to put Maxwell in this, because he's going to be moving around anyways, and that's actually how you use him, whereas with these mages, they generally won't be. Like, you can't move and use Sunfall. Like, you can, but then you're just going to be casting, so you need to turn Accelerate immediately if you're going to actually hit something at range. With Glacial Moon, you can move, you can move 5 and then cast it, so it can be quite good. Oops, let's not do that. Then for range for other units, Narv has extending your range, which puts most of his spells at 5 range, which isn't that far, and I think increases this to 7, but I could be wrong on that. And then for Piccoletta, she has passive 6 range with spamming items. She's kind of like a baby AOE mage that just spams items all game. For Roland, he has a range of like 5 with Flash of Steel, and then he can get a movement of 7 from being in good weather. So he has a surprisingly decent effective range. But between all the units... Oh, yeah, and then... Actually, yeah, Giovanna definitely needs to be in here for range of their best AoE. I think that's fair. Now, for Gaia's Roar, you could argue it could deal more damage than Frederica's Sunfall, but the conditions for it to deal more damage are going to be less frequent. Being on flat ground and having a ton of enemies lined up, there's like a handful of maps where that's going to be the case. Whereas with Sunfall, enemies are generally going to be kind of staggered around and balled up. So that's a much easier condition. It's also easier to have like an Eridor or a Milo crowd control. Especially Eridor, things crowd around him, then they'll just stand there. You can just Sunfall them. So it's much easier to get that off. But Giovanna does have really good range, so I'll put her in there. Do they have secondary AoE abilities when at 2 to 3 TP? And essentially, like, how good are they? So most of these units do. Narv actually has less damage than Corinton and Frederica, generally speaking. At 3 TP, Corinton can Icy Tomb for huge damage. So, and then if we look at Narv, his damage, like his AoE just isn't there. He has Spark, which is okay for single target. But alright, so his fire damage is boosted. Right now it's at 259. And then for Corinton, let's see. Icy Breath damage up, 253. So he has like somewhat similar damage, but the thing that really pushes Corinton over in this category is Icy Tomb. This is a really viable ability to use when spamming Glacial Moon. So Corinton definitely gets this, and then we'll see who else gets this. I would say Frederica probably gets this. Like, look at her Scorch damage. This is without Clear Skies. It's already much higher. Her base damage is ridiculous. So, she has, like, the best 2 TP nuking in the game, in my opinion. She just hits so hard for basic spells. And then Blazing Chains, this is not upgraded, too. We have Scorch damage up. So when she's in good weather, with Scorch, she hits, like, 300. And then it gets, reduced by magic defense, but it's way higher than other units. Like, she's potentially S tier just for her basic damage. For 2 to 3 TP on Maxwell, you have Run Through, which is decent if you get back crits. So it's pretty good. It's like Brush. And then you get 1 TP back if you hit a few things. And then for Roland, you can get Rush for 2 TP. So like both Rush and Run Through, I would say, are pretty good. When you use them correctly, you get back crits, which does deal a lot of damage. So I'm going to put Roland and Maxwell in here for good 2 to 3 TP abilities. And then for Anna and Piccoletta, I'm going to give probably Anna this. Piccoletta will have less turns than Anna because Anna's very fast. But Anna doesn't need TP, and she can just spam 2 times items and also backstab. She can get back damage up off of hitting enemies in the back with items, which is ridiculous. Piccoletta's average damage with items is really good, and she's a good item spammer because she's essentially like a little mini catapult that just slings damaging items the whole game. But I would say Anna definitely out DPS as Piccoletta. But Piccoletta does have range and can make decoys, so it depends on what you want on your team. And then for Narv, his 2 TP isn't that good. For Archibald, Arrow Spray is decent. and it depends on how it's being used. Like if it's consistently hitting things below 50, he's going to trigger 50% kills. So I guess I can put Archibald in here. Instantly killing things below 50 at a 50% rate is pretty good. So, and then Giovanna for good 2 to 3 TP abilities. I would say she does have 2. So I'll give her this as well. Ivy Beam is exceptionally good when you can use it, and Gelled Barrage spam is good. That's her main thing you're going to be spamming, and it is good. So I'm definitely not going to act like, you know, she's bad or something. Travis for 2 to 3 TP. Impending Strike is good. The damage isn't really there, though. If we're just thinking about like damage, this is more like a shutdown. But it's decent. It's something. Okay. So, do they have good mobility? So that automatically knocks out like all these mages. And even Avlora, who just has 5 mobility. Crinton just has 5 as well. So the units with good mobility are like these. And then Piccoletta kind of has like average, like above average mobility. Anna has really good climb and can surmount. Maxwell can move around and jump, you know, traverse. He can also high jump to reposition. Roland just has passive high movement. Giovanna just has passive high movement. And then Piccoletta has like a little bit worse mobility. I would say these 4. Because Anna surmount and Maxwell high jump as well as traverse are really good. So for mobility, definitely Anna, Maxwell. And I'm considering Anna an AOE damage dealer by spamming stones, if you're wondering. She can also get back damage up, increase on her stone throws, and she can throw 2 stones a turn. Roland definitely has good mobility. He can use Rush to rush through enemies, and also that moves him 4 squares. So with a movement bangle and even without, he has 11 move without and 12 move by using Rush. So if you have a movement bangle on him, he has 12 move. If you don't, he has 11 by rushing and then moving. And then I would say it's fair to give this to Giovanna because she just passively has 7 move. All right, can they take a hit or are they squishy? So for units that can take a hit, definitely not any of these mages. Definitely none of these. These units can take a hit. Some are a little bit better than others. For the most tanky units, I would say it's going to go probably to these 2. Because she has Desperate Defenses and decent base stats, and then he has Revive. So I'd say those are the most durable units out of all of these. I think that's reasonable. Now this doesn't really necessarily help them deal damage, but it is useful to have. Alright, how well do they fit into a team comp? So in other words, can you just run them and they're just good, or do they need like, you know, a battery? Do they need special treatment? Do they need like buffs thrown on them in any way, shape, or form? I would say for units that are just good in general, that you can just run at all times, it's definitely Anna and Piccoletta. Probably Maxwell. Avlora, I would say you can't just run her. You have to use a specific team comp with her that relies on low unit count, because otherwise you're missing out on the big value of Lone Wolf, which is the big reason to use her. Otherwise, she can be okay, but you still want to reduce your unit count by at least like 2 or 3, just so she gets stat increase. Frederica. So Narv, I don't like using him because he needs a battery, so I'm going to put him with Avlora. Avlora is good, but she just requires some setup. Travis, I would say he can fit into a team comp, but his heavy smash requires turn accelerator. Crinton definitely can fit into a team comp. Frederica can definitely fit into a team comp. This is just like just running them in anything. Like if you were to just run them, I would say Roland is always good, but you have to know how to use him. But that's true of every unit, but especially with Roland. So he kind of gets a lot of flack because people don't understand how to position him or make use of his movement. Then Archibald, I would say he can just generically be run as well. So I'd say most of these can be generically run. But for the best units, for just like generic use, I would say Giovanna's a little bit more niche. She can be a little bit harder to use. Archibald usually wants a battery, so if you don't run batteries, he suffers. These 2 don't need batteries. You just need to keep them safe. So they're still good for like generically fitting in. I would say these 6 units are pretty good overall. Like the thing with Roland, and I always hear this, like people either love him or they hate him. The people that understand how to use him love him and think he's good, and the people that don't hate him and just write him off. So it's not that he needs a team to account for his weaknesses. It's just that he just needs to be positioned better. And he just needs to be used in a way where he's not exposed to multiple things per set of turns. So like if an enemy has a turn 5 and a turn 6, and one is on either end of Roland, he's going to die, which is true of most units, especially if they can hit for like 200, 300. So he needs to be on the flanks, rushing in and like getting out. But I would say these units can all be generically run into most team comps. So we have Roland, Maxwell, Piccoletta, Anna, Frederica, and Corinton. Alright, so it factor / standout abilities. So for this one, there's quite a lot, to be honest. Like, a lot of these are pretty good. For ones, all right, I'm just going to put Narvoy back here. He's probably not going to win anything, so that'll just help me. And then same thing with Travis. He doesn't really have it factor. He can just go face away. Giovanna, to some degree, does with Gaia's Roar. So Gaia's Roar is good. Avlor, low unit count, Bloody Cross, and just spam is good. Archibald has some good things. But for, like, the absolute best AoE, because that's, like, the it factor we're looking for, Glacial Moon is massive. High Jump is massive. Flash of Steel is good, but it's definitely not as good as High Jump. Now, it is good if you get back crits, though. So it circumstantially can be as good as High Jump, but you need to get lined up enemies back critted. So, and it needs to be more than 3, because otherwise you just use Rush. Sunfall is really good, but the setup's kind of annoying, so I would say it's not as good as these two. And then Anna's AoE can be good, but it's probably on par with Frederica's. Like, a Frederica Scorch is probably comparable to an Anna spamming 2 Firestones. And then Piccoletta's damage, while it's good, it's more of an overtime thing rather than a burst. So I would say for just like raw burst damage at factor, it's Maxwell and Corinton. Because both of them have accessible and big area AoE. The big problem I have with Giovanna's AoE is once you get too much height in the equation, it starts to fall off, whereas with Glacial Moon and High Jump, like if you look at the plus and minus height on these, plus and minus 10, and then I believe Corinton's is the same, plus and minus 10. So if enemies are staggered on different tile heights, you can still hit them with Glacial Moon and High Jump. And the big upside of Maxwell is he can reposition onto high ground with High Jump while also damaging. And both of these are readily available and quite good. Alright. Can they combo with other units easily? I would say a lot of these can. Anna doesn't really combo. She just kind of like spams damage. And then her combo is more with her single target. So I think she's out of this. Piccoletta, she just kind of spams AoE damage. Roland can combo well. Like with Maxwell, because what they can do is they can both like rush and like Flash of Steel and run through and High Jump spam. So like they're actually really good together for just like getting spam off. And then Corinton is good in any team comp except for team comps where you need a lot of physical movement. You know, like your team mobility suffers when you run him by 1. And then also your melee accuracy suffers. So he's better with mage comps. But he can combo with like a battery. Like most of these can combo with things. I would say for like the best units, for just like comboing off of stuff, like if you 2-fold turn Roland, he can double rush, which is actually really good. Like most of these units, like if you 2-fold turn Frederica, she can double Scorch, which is also really good. So like these two are like really good for getting 2-fold turned for when they're at 4 TP. Or even 3 TP, and then it's their turn, then they regen to 4. These two are good for their AoEs, but these have like better mini AoEs, and these have better big AoEs. So I would say they're both, like all 4 of these are really good overall for just like comboing with other units. So I would say Corinton, Maxwell, Roland, Frederica. And then for the final thing, oh wait, this is actually a redundancy. I just noticed that. All right, so that's it for this. So let's actually add these up. So the main contenders, I would say, were Frederica, Corinton, Maxwell, Roland to some degree. I don't think he had as many as the others. All right, so we'll count these up. All right, so Frederica has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories that she either won or tied for. Crinton has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maxwell has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then Roland has 1, 2, 3. All right, and then for other units, we have Giovanna has 1, 2, 3. So Giovanna has 3. So she's tied with Roland. That's actually funny because both of them are lane nukers. Like one's a magical and one's a physical. Piccoletta has, I think, just 1. And then Anna has 3. Okay, so Anna's also tied with Roland and Giovanna. Okay, so here's what we have for best AOE units. So for absolute best, for all the reasons I outlined, I would say it goes to Maxwell. He has run through, which is good, and he has high jump. Like the big upside of him is you battery him and he spams high jump, and he actually can deal really good damage as well as be like an off tank. So you can see here I have him on Endurance Earring. So he's tanky twice because he has 2 lives by default. So he's extremely tanky, and he can get enemies to ball up around him, and he combos really well with Krint and Glacial Moon. So pretty useful. He also has counterattack when he gets attacked. Counter stance. Chance to deal counterattack damage when attacked by adjacent foe. So he deals chip damage. And then next we have Corinton. And then Frederica. So these are your top 3 for just AoE damage. So Frederica, even though Sunfall is hard to get off, her Scorch damage is absurd, especially in clear weather. She does really high base damage. Like if you look at her setup right now, she has magical bracelets. Her magic attack is much higher than other mages. And combined with clear weather damage up, she just deals really good damage. And also she can Sunfall. And then tied for 4th, we have these 3 units. So Anna can spam items and get damage increase on enemies facing away, which is weird because it essentially allows her to backstab with elemental stones, which is actually pretty sick. Roland can rush, spam rush and flash of steel. He passively can hit 2 things. That's another thing with Maxwell. He can passively hit 2 things with basic attacks for free. That's a big upside. Like if money is an issue, spamming elemental stones isn't always an option. Giovanna has pretty good AoEs. Ivy Beam, Gelid Barrage, Gaia's Roar. These are all pretty good. She can always throw a stone too, like infrequently, to set up her own tiles. She can all of these are like about as good as each other for just AoE damage. And then, all right, Piccoletta got 1 point. So let me just make sure no one else got a point. All right, Archibald also got 1 point. Avlora, I think, got like 1 or 2. So she actually should be higher than some of these. Avlora got just 1, I guess. All right, so she's in this category. And then let me make sure Travis didn't get any. Yeah, so these ones would be last. So here's like the breakdown. I would say Maxwell is the overall best AoE unit. Because there's more to AoE damage than just the AoE damage, which seems kind of stupid in a way, but you have to consider like setting the AoE damage up and consistently getting it off. With Maxwell, if you're running Medina, it's pretty easy to do this. Same thing with Corinton. But Maxwell does have like mobility. He can take a hit. That's important because part of dealing AoE damage is being able to advance and to continue to hit more enemy units. So Maxwell can generally safely jump, like high jump in, and then move to kind of get out. Whereas like with Corinton, if he moves up within range of too many archers or enemy mages, he can die very easily. So durability does matter on AoE damage dealers. And some other things. He tied with Maxwell for a lot of things. For secondary AoE, he tied for him. I'm considering removing. I guess for secondary AoE, he has passive attack plus run through, which is fair. So he can always hit 2 things or like 3 things. And run through is good if you get back crits. But I might consider removing Maxwell, from this and tying him with Corinton. But he is a really good unit overall. Now, this isn't who's the best unit out of these. I would say the best unit out of these is probably Corentin. Just because he's always good. But he is squishy, so, like, not being, like, Maxwell having mobility, Maxwell being able to take a hit, these things all matter. So he just barely went out over Corentin. And then for Frederica, she's like a close, like Maxwell won 5 things, Corentin won 6 things, or tied for 6 things, and Frederica won 5 things. So these are very close. Like, these top 3 are extremely close for best AoE. These 2 units are definitely the best AoE units by far. And then Frederica's just damage and consistency makes her really good. And the fact that she can manage her own TP, but to a lesser extent than Corentin, makes her very good as well. And then we have Anna tied with Roland and Giovanna for AoE damage. If you know how to use all of these correctly, or even like in a way that's optimal, their AoE damage is pretty good. They're like lane nukers, and in Anna's case, she's all small AoE, but she can get the back crits, she can do double items, so she's pretty good. And then with these 2 lane nukers, you have magical lane, and then you have physical lane. Both are very strong. Physical needs back crits or benefits from it. Magical just needs enemies lined up. And then we have Piccoletta, Archibald, Laura. These all have some standout AoE features. Piccoletta has pretty good, like, average stats. She's never going to stand out in anything. She's just kind of like a good generalist that just spams items. She has like she has good mobility, but she doesn't have great mobility. She has good defenses, but she doesn't have like great defenses. So like, for durability, she's definitely nowhere near Maxwell or Avlora. Maxwell has a res, and Avlora has desperate defense, so she's not as durable as those. But she's way more durable than, like, you know, these 2. But yeah, that's my list. And then these 2 got last, Travis and Narv. Travis got last because Impending Strike's damage is quite low. You could argue it's comparable to Rush's damage, but it's harder to get back crits horizontally. It's easier to get back crits on enemies that are lined up facing your team, like when they're approaching your team, because as enemies approach your team, they passively line up and face your team to avoid getting back crit. So you can have Roland loop around and easily get Flash of Steel and rush off, whereas to get a horizontal back crit would require way more setup and be really annoying to do. And then also Heavy Smash has a charge, which it's a melee attack too. It's not as good as High Jump or Glacial Moon or even Sunfall, because Sunfall can be used at range, so that makes it better. It can be used at a far range, 0 to 6. Like, putting a dude near a bunch of enemies for a turn to charge up a thing is very annoying. And he also runs the risk of getting shield slammed, which if you get pushed while charging, it negates a charge. It'll stop a charge. If you get moved around by wind magic or physical attacks, it will stop your charge. So it's much more consistent on a mage to have a charge. So yeah, that's my best AoE. Basically, it's Maxwell. Corentin's a close second. They're basically almost tied. If I removed like durability, they would be tied. So if I removed mobility, they would be tied. But mobility and durability matter in this game to the point where I would mention them. So yeah. Let me know if you agree or disagree, what you think about this list. Definitely like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.